Good afternoon and welcome to the Lemonade Legend podcast. I am Michelle Faust and I am so happy to have my fellow Lemonheads here to talk about lemon to lemonade story, challenges that we're going through right now with COVID, and how we're making the best of our situation. So today I am very, very pleased to welcome Melody Johnson with Loving Literacy. Welcome, welcome, Melody.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for having me on your show today. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited to have you here, and I have so many questions that I want to ask you. And the first thing that I would like you to do is just give it a little intro into your business and what you're doing and how you're giving, back with your time and talent to the community.
So I started loving literacy I want to say about in April. And it was based on the fact that I had just left the classroom and I noticed that there was a growing need for parents. And that need was a lot of them are starting to homeschool. And many of them were very confused, upset, not sure what resources to look for. And that's where I came in because I do a lot of creative things. And since I'm just coming out of the classroom, I'm like, oh man, this would be like an ideal resource for this parent. And I started getting requests. And people started to ask me, well, do you have a course? Do you have materials that my child can use? Are you teaching online? And I said, well, why not just make it all together? And that's kind of how Loving Literacy came about. And so how I'm giving back to the community is I'm making sure I'm informing parents that there's other options for them to help get a curriculum that's correct, that's aligned to the Common Core standards. And that's exactly what our product has for those parents. There's lots of curriculum if you go on the internet, but the question is that curriculum right for your child? Is that curriculum going to be effective for your child? Is it aligned to exactly what they need? And so with Loving Literacy, the curriculum we've created for parents, we make sure that we can make it a bit more advanced, or we can make it a bit more easier, or just right for that child.
Well, I think you bring up a great point in our world of technology and Google, and it's almost a little too much information. There's so much out there, but yeah, trying to weed through it all and figure out what is right. And yours sounds like a much more customized approach to the kids and what they need. And the other thing is, if parents are reaching out, they're reaching out because they don't know what direction to go. So navigating the internet is probably not going to offer that much to them. I'm just guessing.
It's, there's so much information that it's hard to weed out what's right for your child and what's not, especially if you're not educated in the pedagogy behind it. And so that can get really confusing because you can have a main standard, but then you have substandards that you have to hit.
Yeah.
And a parent might not be aware of that. Like, I'm not going to expect a parent to be aware of that. So that's where I come in and I make life just a little easier.
Yeah, and my kids are out of school. Thank God. I was the one that was like, you need help with homework? But I do remember, and that was when everything was normal. And yet I still saw something missing, a bit of a disconnect. I knew that in the public school system that my kids were in, that they weren't getting really the optimum. And I just wasn't that mom. I never entertained the idea about homeschooling, ever, ever, ever. And so I was really relying on the school system to fully educate them. But I didn't see it necessarily happening as I thought it should. And I think since then it's gotten even harder. And now we're in COVID and we don't even know if they're going back to the classrooms yet.
It's really weird. I think it's a weird time for everybody because everybody has different situations. So everybody has to deal with it a little differently.
Yep.
So like, for example, in my children's school district, we are going back in August. August 3rd. And I had to double check this today because there was so much different information being put out there. I wasn't sure too, but a lot of the concerns, again, that parents were having is little Johnny's going to be behind. How are we going to help catch him up? That's going to be significantly difficult because now some teachers have been put on furlough and some teachers left the classroom. And the less teachers that you have, the more students that another teacher is going to get.
Right.
So I'm not saying to not rely on school, but what I'm saying is be ready with extra additional resources so that way your child does not fall further behind.
Yeah, because I think even for those districts who have decided that they're going to come back into the classroom, that doesn't mean the next week they'll still be in the classroom. Yeah. Because I think we're in a time where we just have to go week by week, day by day, month by month, understanding, how to keep safe. And there's so many things to consider, like how do they properly clean the buses and clean the classrooms and, do all the extra things. Where's the money going to come from? I think it's just still very confusing. And that and to your point, yes, if you don't have those extra resources in your back pocket ready to go to, you could be left a little high and dry.
And now it's even more pressure that's being put on teachers, having to go to faculty meetings, having to attend conferences online, having to do small groups online. Since everything is being done online for most of the districts, some teachers are struggling because it's a lot of work. And then on top of that, if you have a child that's not meeting that expectation, you probably have to do something called RTI, which is response to intervention, giving them extra attention. It's hard to give extra attention when you have no more time. So that's one of the reasons why I'm reaching out to parents and I'm telling them, listen, now is the time to start getting the additional resources that you can use with your child and not have to worry in the future, oh man, you know what, I should have taken advantage and I should have did this. All it takes is an extra 15 minutes at home doing the activities we have, and that'll help parents.
So 15 minutes can make a significant difference?
It can, because sometimes that 15 minutes will turn into 30 minutes with a child if you play your cards right.
You still have to implement.
Yes. So with Loving Literacy, I've created a lot of activities, and those activities can be seen as games for children. And so with those games, they're going to want to keep playing. Sometimes they don't want to stop, especially if they're like kindergarten, first grade. They'll want to keep going, especially if you're giving them a bit of a challenge or beat your time kind of thing, and they will keep going. But as long as you're having a good positive attitude about it, and you're saying, hey, it's okay, we didn't get it the first time around, but we'll get it again tomorrow, they'll want to keep playing and they'll remain engaged.
Yeah, some of the things that I'm seeing out there is parents who just aren't really equipped with homeschooling. If that, and again, I know all the districts are making decisions, individually. And case in point, I know my daughter at one time was planning on getting her teaching degree, and she's great at it, wonderful at it, but not with her 12-year-old son. She's like, I can teach anybody out there, but when it comes to her son, they're just, like that. And I know she's not alone. It's just all of a sudden you're asking parents to step in a career that they're not trained for.
Yes, and you'll find a lot that, and a lot of parents have told me they experience a lot of behaviors from their child. And they're also going through the issue of COVID, not being able to see their friends, not being able to hug somebody that they really like or see their favorite teacher. And that's something they're going through. And that's where you'll start seeing the behaviors. But another reason why you'll start to see the behaviors, Michelle, is because that child may be feeling very anxious about that content. They may not know that content and they're scared.
Yeah.
That's when you start seeing the behaviors really start to come out. And it can get really challenging for a parent that's not equipped to teach that, and then try to push something, and reinforce it daily if it's not aligned to their skill, and then you see the behaviors. So
Yes.
yeah, that's why I made loving literacy. So it makes life easier for the parent. I do the teaching. I provide the materials for all of the parents that are Common Core aligned, and all they have to do is let them sit in front of the video and watch me teach. That's it. Like that makes life a little easier. And also now some parents are working from home remotely. So they're not just doing one job, they're doing like two jobs. They're trying to homeschool and they're trying to work at the same time. Why not have somebody else that's already equipped to do this for you, and you could do your work? So that I'm thinking, how else can I serve the community? And this is my best way to do it.
Well, I think it's an awesome way because, like I say, I think just my own personal opinion and belief. I think our public school system needed some revamping, anyways. We all know that it had been turning into more of a babysitting, refereeing, behavioral control situation, or, whatever you want to call it. It was moving away from the basics of teaching a bit. And so, like so many people are saying about COVID, maybe this is our chance to reset a little bit and find a different and better way to do things. So
Yeah.
I kind of like the fact that you can offer that as a supplement to their education.
And you know what, part of it too, being able to have someone else teach your kid, it kind of gives you a little bit of, like how you were saying with your daughter, her and her son, just when it comes to learning something, she can't deal with it, and it's okay, because like I've even been through that. I have 3 kids. There's some subjects I just send my kids to for my husband, and it's the same thing. Like there'll be certain subjects he'll say, go to your mom and let her do this. But
Yeah.
in this case, you don't have to go to mom and dad. It'll just be, come sit and watch this video, and then I reinforce that one little skill that they need, and it makes life easy.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with someone the other day who has 3 kids, and she homeschools, and it goes great. She loves it, goes without a hitch, except for her youngest. Her youngest is 6, so he's just entering into the whole homeschooling thing. And she says, you know what? He might be my first one to actually go to school, because it's just that personality thing.
Mm-hmm.
She's obviously well equipped and has the resources available to homeschool, but she's just like, I'm not thinking my 6-year-old and I are gonna do well with this.
Well, I'll tell you 3 tips that I'll give to you today, and hopefully your listeners could use these tips.
Yes.
If you plan on using like homeschooling as doing your major academic subjects, the first thing you've got to do is come up with a routine. You have to have a routine in place. Kids thrive off of routine. We thrive off of routine. You know that you wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, you go eat breakfast, you get dressed like you're going to school. And that's another thing. You gotta get dressed, because if you're in your pajamas, you're just gonna, you just want to lounge, you want to relax. So yeah, you've got to have that routine in place, and you let your children know, not the day of school. You tell them ahead of time, so that way they're preparing for it, and they know, like they're prepared mentally for it, because then they know, okay, I know I have to do this when I
Yeah.
wake up. And the second thing is, like I said, get dressed, because that also sets the kind of tone for the rest of the day.
That's a tip for us home workers too.
Listen, I know some of us are wearing a shirt and maybe some shorts on the bottom because no one sees that Zoom call, but you gotta get dressed. Besides that, you never know when you gotta stand up, right? But yeah, you gotta get dressed. That actually helps set the tone for the day, and it prepares your mind. Okay, this is what I have to do. And then the third thing is, have a short list of what you need your child to do, and go over that short list. So something that I've done for younger children is I would have a picture and I would have a word of the task needed. So an example would be, open your book. Then they see the book open, they do it themselves. And I had this available on an iPad too, so it was just something they see it and then they just do the activity, and that's reinforcing independence for them, which
So
is
you're
what
really,
you want your children to do. You want them to come to you, but you want them to also own some of that too. So those are my
you're
three tips.
setting expectations. I love that. Yeah.
Yes, you have to do that. If you do everything for your child, they're not going to learn. They have to just, you just got to let it and let some things go. Know that it's not going to be a perfect lesson, especially that first one around.
All right. Well, these are great. And tip three?
Well, that was bonus. That was a bonus tip
That's a
right there.
bonus. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I wasn't counting right.
that's all right.
No, that's great because you know, and it's even little things like that that I think um, make such a difference. And again, I think everything you said hold to all of us that are in a new environment working from home as well, because if you've been going to the office and now all of a sudden you find yourself working at home, that schedule just might have gone out the window, or they're
Oh
getting
yeah.
dressed, or how is the boss delivering the expectations now that you're not in that office? So I think it holds to us adults too, trying to figure it out and navigate in a different world.
Yeah, I think this is having to learn the content. That's one thing that's the challenge for the parent. It may be content they haven't seen in a long time, and so now they're having to like relearn some of this stuff. And
Yeah.
then the second thing is they're having to really relearn some of the technology that goes behind it. So you have a lot of people, this also can be for people that are just doing distance learning at home.
Mm.
Um, some parents aren't equipped to navigate well on a computer, or they may know like the basics. So in that case, I would pull up like a YouTube video and try to, learn just a few tips each day, or reach out to another parent, and ask them about whatever computer system or software that they're using. But that's how I would recommend for a parent to do if they're not sure.
Yeah. But I think you hit it big time in there with the technology because unless a parent is, that they're doing that in their daily life, um, now all of a sudden they may be having to work with a program, software, something that is totally foreign to them. Um, but then I would say, like, my 12-year-old grandson can work the computer better than I can.
Yeah, kids nowadays will be able to show you anything. I've done that with my kids in my kindergarten classroom. I didn't at one point I did not know how to work an iPad. I know. I didn't have an iPad. Well, I did have an iPad at that time that the school had lent to me, but I never used it because I didn't know how to use it.
Right.
So I asked one of the kids, "Can you turn this on for me?" They were like, "Oh, Miss Johnson, this is so easy." And they let me show you what you do. And they're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, imagine how a parent that's at home feels like when they have a program in front of them and they're told, okay, you have to check this, each of these classes every day. It can be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
Be
Very
very
much so.
overwhelming. So, that's why I have like the routine, like I have a schedule in place for kids to make sure this is what you need to do and they know what the expectations are. And so that's what I recommend parents make sure that they have.
So, what age group do you design your program for?
So I originally had it for preschool, but preschool is more of like the social skill. So it's from pre-K to second grade.
Okay. Okay. And I'm trying to, there's my imperfect moment. Okay. Anyway,
Yeah, it's okay.
what's my next question? Um, so, I'm going to guess that you feel like really prime time is when you get that child pre-K to second grade, that really sets the stage for how they learn, how
Yeah,
they open their minds. I mean,
it's a critical point actually when you're getting them at that pre-K age. They are like a little sponge. They will soak everything up. Their brain is actually developmentally still growing at that point.
Right.
So they're creating more synapses within their brain to do more connections, and you'll start seeing like if you have, for example, if you have a child that doesn't know how to read in the beginning of the year, but then by like after December, they're just flying off and reading. You're like, how did this kid learn all of this? Because developmentally now they're ready. And every child goes at a different pace. So you have to like kind of pace things out for each child. That's what my program does. I make sure that the child can go at their own pace, not the pace of the program.
How you always hear about the child proteges, reading at 2 or something like that. Really, how young can a child really start to learn the process of recognizing word, forming sentences, that type of a thing, from reading?
So I've seen it as young as 3.
Okay.
With my own children, like my sons, they started reading Dr. Seuss books independently by the time they were in pre-K.
Okay.
And that's it. I'm going to say starting pre-K. And those books are actually a pretty high level book. Like I'm not talking about just a regular Cat in the Hat book, but there's like some other Dr. Seuss books that are really long, and they were able to read it and understand the content.
That
So
is
it's
so
just,
awesome.
you got to do it every day. Just read to your child every day. And then you're going to start seeing them really blossom, especially about the age of two on. Let them pick the book. If they keep picking the same book, it's okay. You know what? Because they're going to learn the tonality. They're going to learn how certain words are emphasized within a book. And they're going to learn about the structure of sentences just based off of you reading to them. That's why it's important to not let a day pass to not read. Like it only takes a few minutes, even if it's the same book. Don't hide it.
Yes, exactly.
Don't hide that book. Let them read it.
Even though you may want to vomit reading this book, for the 400th time.
It was like that with my kids. We'd read If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, and my son just wanted to read that book over and over again. But he loved the book, and he became an amazing reader because we did that repetition. And it's how they learn, is through that repetition. They learn through seeing you read to them, and then they mimic that. They copy exactly what the parent does, and then they do it.
Well, and as a writer and a publisher, I had this fear that people are going to stop reading. I grew up reading. I loved reading. And you talk about doing something over and over again. My favorite book is Gone with the Wind. Always has been. I think it always will be. 862 pages. I know this because I've read it like a dozen times. And I'll probably read it again before I die, but it's reading is just so powerful. And like I see that with my kids, they kind of got away from it a little bit. I've seen them kind of go back to it, and then they sort of give it up, and then they go back to it again because there's so much out there just visually, and TV, movies, and all these things, and the gaming platform that they can entertain themselves without having to sit down and entertain themselves through a book. And I would be very sad if we saw that day came where people really didn't read.
You know what? I'm in agreement with you. I think part of it is, like you said, there's lots of distractions. But if you set the intention of the day and make it part of your routine, then you won't ever have to worry about that. So, for example, I love audiobooks. Like I've been counting like how many books I read, and I've read this entire year. So far now, I'm up to 29 books. The goal is to hit 50 books by the end of the year. And a majority of them are self-development books or, business aspect books. But the key is I've read. And how you do this with your children is you block off that time as part of your schedule. You'll say, depending on how old they are. If they're toddlers, you can't expect them to sit for more than like 5 minutes. Like 5 minutes is really stretching it. But if you have them sit with you and you read, like have them sit in your lap, then they'll read with you. For pre-K, I will say 15 minutes at the max, they'll probably be able to do if you really get them engaged in a book they like.
Yeah.
For kindergarten, at the end of kindergarten, you're expected to read for a whole, I want to say it's a whole 30 minutes. Yeah, for a whole 30 minutes.
That's a lot of time.
That is a lot of time. And so you have to just put that as part of your routine. Have them get their stack of books next to them and tell them for 30 minutes straight. Well, you could break it into 15 minutes if you'd like. 15 minutes straight, you're going to read. I'm going to set this alarm. And when only the alarm goes off, then you stop. But you keep going.
So I think another thing is comprehension, though, because you can have somebody sit down and they're reading, or maybe they're pretending to read and they're like, their mind's wandering off somewhere. So how important is that to check in with them with the, so tell me about the story, or so that they start getting, that's an expectation. They're going to have to tell you what the story was about.
Yes. So, like I was telling you before, the importance of reading daily, like even before bedtime, it's those questions that you can ask your child. What's happening in the book? Who do you see? What do you think's going to happen next? Let them answer those questions. Let them imagine what might happen next. Even if it's the wrong thing, it's okay. You're getting them to start that process of asking questions as they read. And if you do it with them at an early age, say from when they're a toddler, you just keep reading with them like that, and then they're gonna pick up some of those skills along the way. But if you see like they're missing something, like if, say for example, you're reading the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Okay, how many bears are in this story? I only see let's see how many bowls are on the table. Now you're integrating another skill. You're integrating a math skill. You can't rote counting. But if you're doing that, if you're taking that particular skill in reading comprehension and you're pairing it up also with the math skill, it won't be boring for them. So it gives them the ability to start asking questions. That's the most important thing. Let them ask questions, answer the questions. Even if they want to stay on that page for like 2-3 minutes because they want to keep looking at the picture, let them do it.
Yeah, I mean, it can develop observational skills and all kinds of things. So do you believe, I know you offer different academics, but I know that reading is kind of your like real core level. Do you feel that by mastering the reading skill, that just feeds into the math and the science and everything else?
Absolutely. Reading is actually the number one skill that's needed to comprehend anything else. Like you need it for social studies and science so you can understand those vocabulary terms. And then as they get older, those books get increasingly harder and there's less pictures. And then you have less sometimes vocabulary text where it'll tell you what the vocabulary word is. And they're expected to also inference. So to guess what the author is saying without the author actually saying it. So it's so important that they learn to read now. I like to integrate other subjects because it's so much fun for the kids, and then they know it's not just compartmentalized. It's not just one little thing that they're learning. They're learning a whole bunch of other things. But it also helps them gain confidence in themselves. They know that they can accomplish this one task, and then you see such a beautiful growth in how they think. So yes, reading is critical, and it feeds into every single subject, even math, because when you do word problems and you don't know how to read, it's a struggle.
Yeah, I love what you brought up about confidence because it brings up memories. It's like, isn't that kind of the first experience you have in standing up in front of everybody is when, okay, Tommy, you read page 4 and you're in front of everybody. And if you're struggling with your reading, I mean, that's embarrassing. So I don't know, maybe that's a whole other subject that maybe teachers shouldn't put them out there. But the flip side of that is how confident does that make you feel when you can stand up there and read it fluently and well. It's got to set the stage for your confidence as you grow.
It does, but it also sets the tone for writing. And so if you're not a strong reader, then you're most likely not a strong writer, because both of those skills, they go hand in hand.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of them go hand in hand. And sometimes when the teachers are trying to read, the part of the problem is we can't just do one-on-one sessions with each and every child. Like
Yeah.
you may have a teacher with like 23 kids in a class, sometimes 25. So you group them on the same reading ability, and then you pull that group and you teach that small group while everyone else is doing a task that you've given to them. But that's the beauty of what I do. I have my group, but then you can also do it separately with your child.
Because I remember my kids, it seemed as though, and this isn't a fault of the teacher, this was just the system that they had to teach to the lowest level.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of like I don't even recall that really getting grouped. It seemed to me more that they made sure they were teaching to that lowest level of understanding in the class, and then kids could have the option of picking up extra work or assignments or things like that. But that's what I saw at the time my kids were going through school, and that's like, oh,
Oh, that is quite different. That's very different. But as time goes on, you're gonna also find that a lot of reading programs that are new have been introduced into the classroom, and a
mhm,
lot more research has been put into those programs. And so now it's introduced a little differently. For some, they may not, sometimes teachers may not want those particular programs because they have a certain way that they like to teach, and they've seen the growth in these children. But it just depends on the educator. It depends.
well, it does, and it's been a while since my kids were in elementary school, but and I've seen it with my grandson, and he has turned into a very very avid reader, and I love the fact that the students in his class kind of self-design their reading program. They set a goal of how many books they're going to read, that type of a thing, so that it's not, okay, this is your assignment is to read this book. It's like, no, we've got a reading program, and they get excited themselves. If they best them their best expectation, and they best that, then it's like, wow, I exceeded my own goals. So I do think there's been a lot of changes since, or maybe my district where I live is just.
It does, and it does depend on the district, because it depends on, can they afford to buy that particular reading program
Yeah.
for that class. Like they have to buy one kit per class, and so sometimes it's not just the kits, they have to buy additional books. I was very fortunate. I saved every single book that I had with each of my kids, and I brought them to the classroom. I must have had over 1,000 books. Like
Oh,
I had a large library, and the parents were really like happy to see that, because I knew that the kids would love to read.
yeah.
And so each week they got the opportunity to pick books, and they picked up to like 10 books in their bin. And I would tell them half of those books have to be books you know how to read. And then the other half has to be like, I usually do like one level up to give them a bit more of a challenge.
Sure, yeah.
And
You
they, and
always have to
that's how
be.
you see them thrive. I mean, you just tell them like, what, be interested in what it is that they like.
Yeah.
Be interested. So like, I'll give you an example. I had a parent not too long ago that said, my child hates reading. I don't know what else to do. So I asked, do you allow your child to pick their books? They said no. And I said, well, why not? And they said, because I don't know what kind of books he's going to pick. And I said, well, why don't you pick books together? Like, get a whole bunch of books.
Mm-hmm.
Then you say, here, you pick from these books. If you pick whichever books you want, but
Yeah.
kids want choice. They need that. They thrive off of that. And if they don't have that choice, then they're not going to be interested in reading it. We may be interested, but they're not.
Yeah, they're more invested in what they're reading because they got to pick it up. So
Yes.
I think that's great. I could talk all day long about reading. It's why I do what I do.
I love reading too. Believe me, I would go on and on with you about that as well. I always think about like my earliest memory of reading. I lived in Brooklyn, New York, and we were right near the Brooklyn Library, and it was huge. I'm talking about this library was big. And
Yeah.
every Saturday, my mom would take me, and I would take out the maximum amount of books. And there was always one book in particular that I always took out that was way above my reading level. I want to say it was like Greek mythology. I was
Really?
really
Wow.
interested in that and the pictures and the story behind it. I just thought it was like so awesome. And from doing that and reading, I just read all those books. And then I would go back the following week, we'd return those and we'd get more.
Yeah.
It's just the exposure too. Like if you're
It is. And I went to the library all the time as a kid. And my first job, it was volunteer. I wasn't paid for it. I think I was about 14, but I was a page at the local library. I would literally, since I wasn't a paid employee, they kind of let me do whatever I wanted to do, which was, I was supposed to be shelving books. I would just get lost in the shelf. They wouldn't see me all day. Now, I would eventually get all the books put away, but I'd sit down, I'd pick a book, I'd sit down on the floor, and I'd just, bury myself in a book. And it was the best job I ever had.
I worked at Barnes and Noble, and I used to do the same thing. I would clean the shelves, put away the books, and then I'd start flipping through a book, and then I'm like starting to read the book. I'm like, wait, I'm working. I gotta put this book back, and then I'd like save up whatever little money I had, or they'd allow us to borrow the books and read them and bring them back. We signed up for it. So that was really cool. But I don't know how many books I might have read there. I've read a lot.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of time to read right now, but I'm reading other people's stories just because and publishing them so I'm still getting my reading time in, but it's part of my job. I love that. And I just had to tell you, because I was flashing through my mind, I still can kind of remember that first book I ever got that didn't have pictures. I kept flipping through. Where's the picture? It's when you're just, graduating from that stage, and I'm like, oh.
I've had that with kids that have told me that, but I would try to give them a heads up and tell them, the higher the book level goes, you're going to see less pictures. And then at some point, there's no pictures. And they're like,
so you have to use your mind.
Yeah.
Use your imagination. Yeah. This is so great. Really have loved it because, yes, you touch on my love of reading. So, and I don't care what we're going through, whether it's COVID or whether everything, goes back to normal in a classroom. I don't think you can get too much. You can supplement learning too much. It just, I think it's very important what you're doing. And
thank you so much.
Tell the audience how they can get a hold of you.
Okay, so you can reach me on Facebook, Loving Literacy 01. You can contact me at and send me a private message, and I can definitely help you. And I'll probably send you a calendar message so we could book a 15-minute consultation for free. You can also go and look at my website, lovinglit.com. And on there, I have a course that you can use for beginning readers. And that one is specifically through Udemy. But that one is not like the one I'm going to do that's live. The one that's live will be on Kajabi, and that's going to be totally separate. So you just reach out to me there, and I will get in contact with you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on here. And thank you to all my listeners out there. I really appreciate you being here and learning a little bit along the way, helping make a little bit of lemonade out there. I so appreciate all of you, and Melody, you are fabulous. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you putting me on the show.